Video of the first section of Book 10 of Paradise Lost, a section in which I titled Snakes Everywhere, a preview of Paradise Lost, Book 10, lines 1 to 719. So, first of all, a quick preview and overview of these lines. I do this again to anchor you in your reading so you have a sense of what's going on. I think what's most interesting about Paradise Lost is not the plot. So I think it's helpful if we're going to soak in the language and appreciate it to not be overly anxious about what's literally happening. That being said, the problematic character of God rears his head again. Book 9 just featured the fall of Adam and Eve. God needs to say something. And because he's God, he can't be surprised by Adam and Eve falling. But because he's God, he's an awfully difficult character to read, to like. It's obviously impossible to empathize with him in any real way. So that's a constant conversation with my students is what do we make of Milton's incredible challenge? Things unattempted yet in prose or rhyme. I think one of the significant challenges he sets out to face is the creation of a Judeo-Christian God as a literary character. Then the Son, S-O-N, descends to paradise, talks with Adam, and it's right out of the Bible, just in blank verse in English. Adam blames Eve for the fall. Eve says what happens, blames the serpent. So God's curses rain down. He curses Eve's future with labor pains. He curses Adam with hard work. You're going to have to labor by the sweat of your brow. And the serpent is cursed by being a serpent. You have to crawl on your belly, dust and everything. But there's this little interesting addendum, which is that the serpent will be stepped on and destroyed by the heel of the woman, and by the woman's seed. This isn't a gardening reality. This is Eve's descendants will feature a second Eve, Mary, who, unlike the first Eve, Eve 2.0, will not fall. Eve 2.0 will be obedient to the will of God, and as a result, will give birth to God's Son, whose passion, death, and resurrection will destroy the power of evil and Satan's power forever. Now, you can believe this theologically or not. That's obviously a personal choice. I'm just saying what's living inside this poem here is interesting. I'm a music director at a Catholic church, and that's my other job other than teaching. And we do have a statue of Mary that's just like this, a very open, motherly statue, but at the same time, she's stepping on a serpent. And so Satan's curse is interesting, to say the least. So here are some other plot points that stand out. Again, feel free to mark your books, do whatever you think is helpful, but I think it's just good to have a sense of this stuff. So there's a conversation we forget that sin and death are still sort of at the gate that can't be closed after Book 2 of Paradise Lost. And they're chatting about what they imagine has been happening on Earth. They have not been reading Paradise Lost. And we'll talk about this, they build this incredible bridge between hell and earth over chaos. And that way sin and death can enter into the earthly realm more easily. It's really epic and brilliant. We then get a little satanic backstory. Satan engages with sin and death and actually tells them what he was doing during and after the fall of Adam and Eve, and the fact that he fled when God's Son came to paradise. Sin praises Satan for his victory, as we might predict. Satan releases sin and death to earth, so they go in one direction. Satan returns to hell. This is really interesting. 7, Satan addresses his fellow angels. This is his last significant speech to the angels in hell. And we get his rendering of the temptation and fall of Adam and Eve, which is interesting. 8, this kind of reminds me of when Beowulf, and I'm not comparing Beowulf to Satan. We do think Milton knew Anglo-Saxon, so that's a separate conversation. But when Beowulf returns home to Geatland and he gives his version of the Grendel and Grendel's mother battle, how tonally and even plot-wise it's slightly different than the version the poet gives us in real time. So Satan's version of the temptation and fall has some interesting things. 8, we get this fascinating demonic response to Satan's victory speech. There's lots of allusions here, and I think a really interesting thing would be don't worry about them as you read. Obviously, none of us know everything that Milton knows, but it's really, really great, as my students see every year, to stop and look at a chunk of lines and look up what the words mean and look up the allusions and ask, what are they doing here, right? Um, but this is a mind blowing chunk of text that we'll look at closely. Sin and death enter earth. God offers commentary from on high. He sees sin and death infiltrating his blessed realm and kind of rants. So we'll look at that as well. Angels, predictably, sing God's praises. And we're told of like the cosmic effects of the fall, how the planets and nature herself responds. That's not in scripture, by the way. Um, that's a Miltonic addition. That's kind of brilliant. Okay, here's my obvious passage Satan's final speech to the demons. And this is a dad joke, I'm sorry. And their surprising response. You'll get it in a minute. Maybe you understand it now. So, first of all, he addresses them according to their proper angelic categories. Thrones, dominations, princedoms, virtues, powers are kinds of angels in the hierarchy of angels. And this is the last time in the poem Satan calls them these things. And you'll see why, I think. So this is Satan's big ticker tape parade military victory speech, right? Thrones, dominations, princedoms, virtues, powers. For in possession such, not only of right, I call ye, and declare ye now, returned successful beyond hope, to lead ye forth triumphant out of this infernal pit, abominable, accursed, the house of woe, and dungeon of our tyrant. God is a tyrant to Satan. Lots of irony there. Now possess as lords a spacious world to our native heaven, little inferior. It's just a little worse than heaven, the earth. By my adventure hard, with peril great achieved. So he toots his own horn here. Long were to tell what I have done, what suffered, with what pain voyaged the unreal, vast, unbounded deep of horrible confusion. This is like Othello saying, rude am I of speech, and then giving a beautiful speech. Or Polonius saying, brevity is the soul of wit, as he is going on and on. This is a little trick, a little rhetorical trick politicians do all the time. I'm just a plain spoken regular person, and then you delineate a 13-point economic plan. Long were to tell what I have done, what suffered, with what pain voyaged the unreal, vast, unbounded deep of horrible confusion, over which, by sin and death, a broad way now is paved. Sin and death had paved this bridge over chaos to expedite your glorious march. So the reason you're going to have, to the demons, you're going to have easy access to the earth, is I've sort of destroyed God's creation, and we built a bridge to get to God's creation over and over again. But I toiled out my uncouth passage. Uncouth is from the Anglo-Saxon verb, which means like not known. It means unknown, to be out of the know. So when he had originally journeyed, he had never been there before, and he was guessing. But now there's this bridge, and Satan has made it easier for his angels to continually pervert God's creation. Forced to ride the untractable abyss, plunged in the womb of unoriginal night and chaos wild. He just said he wasn't going to talk about all this, but, whatever. That, jealous of their secrets, fiercely opposed my journey. Strange. So night and chaos, the characters, opposed Satan taking this trip. With clamorous uproar, protesting fate supreme. Thence how I found the new created world, which fame in heaven long had foretold, a fabric wonderful of absolute perfection. Therein, man placed in a paradise by our exile made happy. Him by fraud I seduced from his creator. I love how he just admits that. Like Satan doesn't tap dance around what happened with his demons. It's interesting. And the more to increase your wonder with an apple. With an apple. He's incredulous himself. By the way, I'm almost 99% sure Milton invents the idea that the fruit was an apple. Gilgamesh, where this story sort of originated, I think, and Genesis itself. There's no mention of the kind of fruit. We think it's an apple because Milton put that there. Probably because his readers, that would be a very common fruit, and that was the point, that Satan did this with an everyday kind of thing. And Satan continues, he thereat offended, worth your laughter. I'm fascinated by laughter in epic poetry. It's never appropriate. It's usually insulting. I think of Unferth and Beowulf. I think of the suitors laugh in the Odyssey. Look at here, right? Hath given up both his beloved man and all his world to sin and death a prey, and so to us without our hazard, labor, or alarm. God lost everything, and it wasn't even that difficult, Satan says, to range in and to dwell, and over man to rule as over all he should have ruled. True is, me also he's judged. So Satan admits, I've been judged as the serpent, or rather me not, but the brute serpent in whose shape man I deceived. That which to me belongs is enmity, which he will put between me and mankind. I am to bruise his heel. I will be snapping at the heel of mankind. I am constantly tempting mankind. His seed, who we know later as Jesus Christ, which is not set, shall bruise my head. A world who would not purchase with a bruise. In other words, like, oh, you're just going to bruise me? I can destroy your creation and the entire world and ruin everything, and I just get a bruise out of it? Or much more grievous pain. Satan continues, yet have the account of my performance. Ye have the account of my performance. This is after he said he wasn't going to tell it, but here it is. He can't help himself. What remains, ye gods, but up and enter now into full bliss? So we should just go to earth now and hang out and be absolutely happy destroying God's creation. Watch this. Narrator says, Satan ends there. Narrator says, so having said, a while he stood, expecting their universal shout and high applause to fill his ear, when, contrary, he hears on all sides, from innumerable tongues, a dismal, universal hiss, the sound of public scorn. He wondered, but not long had leisure, wondering at himself now more, his visage drawn he felt to sharp and spare, his arms clung to his ribs, his legs entwining each other, till supplanted down he fell, a monstrous serpent on his belly prone, reluctant, but in vain. A greater power now ruled him, punished in the shape he sinned, according to his doom. He would have spoke, but hiss for hiss returned with forked tongue to forked tongue. For now we're all transformed alike, to serpents all, as accessories to his bold riot. Okay, so what just happened? Satan was turned into a serpent. And because all the demons were sort of accessories and supporters of Satan, they turn into serpents too. I have to say, I think there's really interesting echoes with the play Othello here. Shakespeare's greatest villain, I think in my view and in a lot of people's view, is Iago. Second most lines in all of Shakespeare, next to Hamlet. And just a destroyer of his general from the inside out. Incredibly brilliant psychological character. Spoiler alert, you've had 400 years to read it. Iago's a villain who doesn't die at the end. He says he's been destroying Othello and deceiving him, and Othello asks, why did you do this? And Iago says, what you know, you know. From this time forth I shall not speak word. And he mutes himself. And Iago, not having access to language, is a kind of death. And I would argue Satan, not having access to language, is a kind of death. You'll also notice when the sound of hissing happens in a sort of like a sonic hypnosis, Milton is using repeated S sounds. So he's not just telling us it's happened, he's making us say the words as if we're experiencing it too, which is just friggin' brilliant, I think. I don't know, my opinion. And then he can't help himself. He's like, he knows all the famous serpents throughout mythology. One of my prompts later in this video is to look these up, because they're all different. They all have different histories and are fascinating. Dreadful was the din of hissing through the hall, thick swarming now, with complicated monsters, head and tail, scorpion and asp, and amphisbaena dire, Cerastes horned, Hydrus and Alops drear and Dispus. Not so thick swarmed once the soil bedropped with blood of Gorgon on the isle Ophisua, but still greatest he the mist, now dragon grown, larger than whom the sun engendered in the Pythian veil or slime. Huge python. So he's pausing, saying, you know what this is like? It's sort of related to all these other snakes throughout mythology. I think it's important as a reader when you're reading great literature like this to not freak out when you don't know what all the words mean. Pick your spots, look things up, but relax. His power no less he seemed above the rest, still to retain. So Satan isn't powerless, he's still the most powerful serpent. They all him followed, issuing forth to the open field where all yet left of that revolted rout, heaven fallen, in station stood, or just array, sublime with expectation, when to see in triumph issuing forth their glorious chief. They saw, but other sight instead. A crowd of ugly serpents, horror on them fell, and horrid sympathy. For what they saw they felt themselves. Now changing, down their arms, down fell both spear and shield, down they as fast as the dire hiss renewed, and the dire form catched by contagion, like in punishment as in their crime. Thus was the applause they meant, turning to exploding hiss, triumph to shame, cast on themselves from their own mouths. I don't know. I just think this is like some of the most brilliant poetry in the book. So totally worth spending more time on. I love this subtle passage of the bridge being built over chaos, that shadowy ground between hell and earth. So death says to sin, they haven't been reading Paradise Lost. So death says, go, whither fate and inclination strong leads thee. I shall not lag behind, no, ere the way, thou leading. Such a scent I draw of carnage, prey innumerable, and taste the savor of death from all things there that live. So death can't wait to just devour everything on earth. Nor shall I to the work thou enterprisest be wanting, but afford thee equal aid. Death is incredibly wonderful and creepy. So saying with delight, death snuffed the smell of mortal change on earth. Epic simile alert, as, so mark your books, ES. What is it like when death smells all the possibilities on earth? It's as when a flock of ravenous birds, ravenous fowl, though many a league far away, against the day of battle to a field where armies lie encamped, come flying, lurid with scent of living carcasses designed for death, the following day, in bloody fight. So scented the grim feature. So what is it like for death to contemplate approaching earth? It's like a vulture just seeing a battlefield, knowing many of these creatures will be corpses soon. That's how death feels. And upturned his nostril wide into the murky air, sagacious of his quarry from so far, he's completely knowledgeable of what he's about to partake in. Then both from out hell gates into the waste wide anarchy of chaos, damp and dark, flew diverse, and with power, their power was great, hovering upon the waters, what they met, solid or slimy, as in raging sea, tossed up and down, together crowded drove, from each side shoaling toward the mouth of hell. As, here we go. Now, I did look up some of these things. So I've printed out notes. So if you see me kind of reading, I don't know everything Milton knew, and I think that's fine. Like, I have no desire to know that much, frankly. I like to, talk to people and go out. So what is it like when they're journeying out of hell, as when two polar winds blowing adverse upon the Cronian Sea? The what sea? This is the sea. It's mentioned in Ovid, and it's similar to the passage here, because when Zeus dethrones, Saturn identifying with Kronos after Jupiter identified with Zeus, dethroned Jupiter from Olympus, wandered through the seas on a ship until he came to this river, and the gulf on this river was called the Sea of Kronos. So again, it has to do with supernatural battles, just like what we're dealing with here. Um, anyway, together drive mountains of ice that stop the imagined way beyond Petsora, which was their way of saying Russia, eastward to the rich Cathian coast, which is China. So why mention these things? Because Milton digs back into mythology to give you feelings, other sort of supernatural rebellions and conflicts, and then he digs into his knowledge of world geography to show you how vast the space is. The aggregated soil death with his mace petrific, cold and dry as with a trident smote, and fixed as firm as Delos, a really important mythological site in ancient Greece, the birthplace of Apollo um, and Artemis. Um, Floating once. The rest is look, bound with Gorgonian rigor. So we know what a Gorgon is, like Medusa. Three female monsters. You look at them, you turn to stone. So, what kind of rigor and enthusiasm does sin and death have? It's like a Gorgon's enthusiasm. And what do Gorgons do? They destroy you just by looking at them. So this is less about can you use Wikipedia or mythology websites, and it's more about, yes, get that information, but then ask the next question. What's it doing here? So far we have mythological sort of conflicts resonating with the conflicts happening in Paradise Lost with sin and death and what they're about to do. There's also the vastness of geography. We have Russia and China mentioned. Um, and we also have other sort of mythological monsters. And with asphaltic slime broad as the gate, deep to the roots of hell, the gathered beach they fastened, and the mole immense wrought on over the foaming deep, high arched, a bridge of length prodigious, joining to the wall immovable of this now fenceless world, forfeit to death. From hence, a passage broad, smooth, easy, inoffensive, down to hell. So now it's easy to go from earth to hell. It wasn't before. So if great things to small may be compared, and then we get Xerxes, who's that great Persian ruler. We get, um, Far East rulers, Greek rulers. So again, it's there's warfare and battles and conflict resonating here, but also geographical scope. So if great things to small may be compared, Xerxes, the liberty of Greece to yoke, from Susa, his Menominee palace high, came to the sea, and over Hellespont, bridging his way, Europe with Asia joined, and scourged with many a stroke the indignant waves. So these are other moments where lands have been bridged and straits have been crossed. Now had they brought the work by wondrous art, they being sin and death, pontifical. Uh, One of the words for pope is pontiff. Pontiff comes from the Latin word meaning bridge. So a bridge of pendant rock over the vexed abyss, following the track of Satan to the selfsame place where he first lighted from his wing and landed safe from out of chaos to the outside bare of this round world. And then, how do they fasten the bridge? With pins of adamant, the supernaturally hard substance from mythology. In chains they made all fast, too fast they made, and durable. A little suggestion here that this is why there's so much sin in the world, that the bridge between hell and the world was made in such a sturdy fashion. That obviously has metaphorical resonance as well. And then an interesting moment, God's response to the fall and to sin and death's entrance into the world. I don't know what to do with this. You maybe post something on my page here. God says to his angels, "See, with what heat these dogs of hell, sin and death, advance to waste and havoc yonder world, which I, so fair and good, created, and had still kept in that state, had not the folly of man let in these wasteful furies, who impute folly to me. So doth the prince of hell, Satan, and his adherents, that with so much ease I suffer them to enter, and possess a place so heavenly. I let them have it," he says, "and conniving seem to gratify my scornful enemies that laugh, as if transported with some fit of passion, I to them had quitted all, at random yielded up to their misrule. And know not that I called and drew them there, my hellhounds, to lick up the draught, the garbage, the dregs, and filth which man's polluting sin with taint hath shed on what was pure, till, crammed and gorged, nigh burst with sucked and glutted offal, the parts of animal that you don't eat, at one sling of thy victorious arm, well-pleasing Son, both sin and death and yawning grave at last, through chaos hurled, obstruct the mouth of hell forever, and seal up his ravenous jaws. And this is like the New Testament in a nutshell. God says to the Son, then, when you ostensibly die and rise again, then heaven and earth renewed shall be made pure to sanctity. Then shall receive no stain. Till then the curse pronounced on both proceeds. So God has like this little emotional moment about everything that he knew was going to happen. So it's just problematic. Questions for journaling. Not limited to this. Look up the mythological history of these serpents, scorpion, asp, etc. And my question is Milton just showing off? And the answer is no. What is he up to? What do each of these serpents add to the discussion of evil in the poem? Secondly, when Adam and Eve fall, all of nature falls with them. As I said earlier, this isn't in the Bible. Milton adds this. Why, do you think? Third, I think the sounds in Book 10 are important. The one I mentioned about the demonic hissing, sort of onomatopoeia, so that's there. But also pay attention to the sounds of how Adam and Eve talked to each other after the fall. They spoke in sort of long speeches before, and now it's almost like angry staccato barks and bickering. So just pay attention to how the poem sounds. And as always, reflect on a moment or passage that stands out to you. I did not focus on many things here. So what else is interesting or problematic to you? I hope this video helps, and good luck with your reading.